Test, test, test.
Hello? Hello? How are you feeling, Jesse?
I'm feeling good.
Did you ever have symptoms?
No, we get tested today and then
Oh, okay. Were you tested?
no, not yet.
No.
We get tested today at like chapel time.
Okay.
Someone's coming.
Okay. Evan, you out of the dugout yet?
Not yet. Tomorrow's the day I'm free.
Not yet? Okay. Feeling all right?
Yeah, actually, I'm feeling pretty good.
Oh, praise the Lord. So you got vaccinated the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I sure did.
It's Jess's birthday, Dr. Brennan.
Hey, Kels. Morning. Morning, Kaylee. Hey, John. All right, we're going to start here pretty soon. So, first of all, order business, happy birthday, yes. And we have some people who are now doing Zoom. They won't be in class with us just yet. I have some folks who will be coming off quarantine, hopefully will be joining us in the near future. And yeah, oh, by the way, if you are interested, I brought this in. I mentioned this first day of class. This is the Mosby memory note cards. On Amazon, I think they're 20 some odd bucks. So they have little silly mnemonics, cartoons, things like that. One of the things that I think are really useful is on the back of each card, they have little points to remember. So each thing essentially corresponds to a group of drugs, so on and so forth. It's kind of handy if this sort of thing helps you. You can pick one of these up on Amazon. I think this is the 4th edition. I think we're up to the 6th edition now. So that means it's more expensive. So Mosby pharmacology memory note cards if you're interested. Don't require these, but if you're visual and you like silly mnemonics, then this is for you. All right, let's go ahead and start with a prayer. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for this Spirit that will teach us all things, that will remind us and everything you have said to us. Thank you for your peace that you leave with us. Not as the world gives. Thank you because of that peace. We can not be afraid. We pray now, we not live with spirit of fear, but with one of courage. As we learn today, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so the Food Drug Cosmetic Act of 1938 that replaced the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. So this is going to replace that area of legislation. The impetus for this was the sulfonylamide disaster that occurred just a year or two before. And with this, you have the drug that tastes pretty awful. To get it to where it's palatable, they made what was called an elixir. Today, when you hear the word elixir, you probably think of Harry Potter.
Yes.
But elixir in those days meant a syrup. A syrup. So it was thick, it was sweet, it made up medicine, and it was palatable. Not something from Harry Potter, double, oil and trouble, fire, burn, and cold and bottle. No, it was something that was actually not magical and meant to be good. Well, the elixir had, let's see, it had raspberry flavoring, and then sucrose, and to dissolve sulfonylamide, they used ethylene glycol, and they didn't test it before they used it. And this, of course, is deadly poisonous. Now, after the doctors started prescribing it, patients started dying. FDA actually had no power to seize the medicine, but they discovered that the drums were mislabeled. That gave them the authority to seize the drums, but before FDA was able to confiscate all the drums of the elixir, close to 200 people have died, mainly children. So Congress swung down the country, as you might guess, was outraged, and Congress swung into action, and they passed the Food Drug Cosmetic Act of 1938. So one of the big sections here is that food colorings and any additives. So additives would include solvents used to dissolve the drug, anything you're putting in for taste, for color, for texture, anything like that, be it food or medicines, must be rigorously tested for safety before you do so. Before that, you could use things and not be so sure about their safety. Couldn't do that after this particular act was passed. Now, we think about that and we say, well, duh, sure. Before we put something in a pill, before we put something in an elixir, yeah, you're gonna test it. Wasn't the case back then. So it was very much a buyer beware. But who are the buyers in this case? Doctors. Your doctor gives you something, you're gonna trust them. You're gonna take it, right? So this corporation was called Massingdale Corporation. They, of course, went out of business, and the owner committed suicide. 6 months later, it was a very sad story. So we got that legislation from this, and this sort of thing was hopefully averted from that on. The Durham-Humphrey Act of 1951 distinguished between drugs that were over the counter and drugs for which you had to have a doctor's prescription. So prescriptions in those days were very limited to things like opiates for painkillers or something like that. There were lots and lots of things you could buy over the counter. The doctor would tell you to buy it, you wouldn't buy it, or maybe you buy it without the doctor telling you that. This act essentially established this nice demarcation between prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs. So drugs that have been available, oh gosh, for decades, aspirin, things like that. They were over the counter. Other drugs required a prescription. That was the Durham-Humphrey Act. Then in 62, almost a decade later, we got the Kefauver-Harris Amendment. This established the so-called proof of efficacy standard. Now, safety not only has to be tested, you also have to be able to show the drug was effective. This legislation came on the heels of the thalidomide disaster. So thalidomide, yes, it was used for morning sickness, nausea, that sort of thing. It was not approved in the United States. Francis Oldham Kelsey was the FDA head. He refused to approve it. So Kelsey said there's just not enough data to show that this is safe in people, and he was right. He turned out to be prophetic. The drug was approved in Europe, and then women who had taken this drug gave birth to babies that were severely deformed. They lacked arms, they had deformed legs, they were missing knees, they didn't have ears. Some cases, they were missing parts of the brain. So this was called phocomelia. Phocomelia. And this was linked to thalidomide. And it turns out if you test thalidomide in the wrong laboratory animals, it does not show any effects upon baby. So only if you test it in the right animal models, then it shows effects on the baby. So the thalidomide episode essentially brought forward the Kefauver-Harris Amendment. It established proof of efficacy. Also, it allowed for the establishment of generic drugs. That could be brought forward as alternatives to more expensive name brand drugs. Then in 1970, you had the Controlled Substance Act, which established the drug schedules. This act has been updated many times, but the drug schedules you have today are the result of this legislation. There have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 different amendments to this act since 1970. The last amendment was in 2017. So it's constantly being updated. So it established the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, and it scheduled drugs according to the degree of dependence that the drug might engender in someone, whether that dependence was physical or psychological or both, and its tendency, therefore, for abuse. So the higher the schedule, the more restrictive the drug. Excuse me, let me make that clear. The greater the number of restrictions on the prescription for the drug. So let me give you an example. Do any of you know anyone who takes Adderall? Okay, can you go to the doctor and get your supply of Adderall? No. Nope, it's a Schedule 2. You have to go to the doctor, get the prescription. Every time you need more Adderall, you need a new prescription. It's Schedule 2. Can't get your supply of Adderall. Nope, not allowed under law. So that's an example of a drug that has more restrictions on it because it's more habit forming than other types of drugs. All right, let's take a look at these schedules. Schedule 1 has a high potential for abuse, either physical or psychological, usually both. The other feature about Schedule 1s, they have no recognized medical use. No recognized medical use. So the drug is unsafe to use even under medical supervision. Now, does that mean it can't be used in a clinical trial? No, can't be used in a clinical trial under special dispensation. But the drug is illegal if you're caught possessing it or making it. You will spend time in the podium. By law.
I see cannabis is on here. Will that be changing now that it's becoming?
Probably.
Yeah.
You have this disconnect now between the states and the feds. It's a contradiction that will probably get changed, I would guess, within the next decade. That would be my best guess. Again, I'm not a prophet, I'm the son of a prophet, but that's my my best guess. So here are some examples of Schedule 1s. LSD. Now, LSD is being used in clinical trials for people with PTSD. So, might this drug have a medical use in the future? Maybe. I don't know. So it's being used in clinical trials under very, very close supervision. But if you have this drug in possession, without that kind of licensing, you're in violation of the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate. Have you heard of that? Let me change the name. Date rape drug. Now, have you heard of it? That's GHB. It's illegal. Now, there's a prescription form of GHB for narcolepsy called Xyrem. That's a different formulation. You can have that if you're prescribed by your doctor. It's a Schedule 3. If you have the non-pharmacological preparation of that, you're in violation. Ibogaine, that is a plant product that's also used for recreational use by some people. Cannabis, hashish, various types of opiates, heroin would be the big there. Cocaine is used as a topical anesthetic in some dental procedures. That's a very specific pharmacological prep, not the powdered stuff you sniff. The powdered stuff you sniff, you're in violation of the CSA. So those are Schedule 1s. High opportunity, propensity for addiction, no recognized medical use. Schedule 2s, once again, high potential for abuse. Abuse may lead to severe physical and/or psychological dependence, but the drug has a recognized medical use. Has a recognized medical use. So cocaine, that would be the pharmacological prep that's used as an anesthetic for medical procedures. Methylphenidate, you probably know this drug as Ritalin. That's used for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Opium, mixtures of opium are used as sleep aids and as painkillers, particularly in hospice, places like that. Heroin, there are prescription versions of heroin that are used in hospice settings. Methadone, which is a opiate used mainly to treat opiate abuse disorder. Methadone is only available in federally licensed clinics. When you go to a methadone clinic, you leave the methadone in your veins. No doctor can prescribe you methadone. You can only get it in those clinics. You have methadone outside those clinics, on your hand, you're in violation of the CSA. Oxycodone, basically all your opiates, all your prescription opiates are in Schedule 2, all of them. Schedule 3, once again, recognized medical use. You have a propensity for addiction if you use it, but a lower propensity than you have with Schedule 2s. So this would include ketamine. Ketamine. Now, let me give you a caveat here with ketamine. Ketamine is used as a muscle relaxant. It's used as an anesthetic. Now, there's a spray version that's used as an antidepressant. All of those are Schedule 3. All of them. The spray version is a nasal spray. Hydrocodone, dihydrocodone. That is an oral opiate. It's a rather weak one as opiates go. If any of you have any sort of orthopedic procedure, you might have been prescribed that. Anabolic steroids that are used for wasting sort of syndromes, those are Schedule 3s. And then barbiturates. Barbiturates tend to be anti-seizure medicines, sedation medicines. They're not being used very much anymore because they've been replaced by other drugs that are less addictive. But barbiturates, like phenobarbital, those are Schedule 3s. Also, you might have heard of Marinol is a derivative from marijuana, from cannabis, from reefer. So this is a compound purified from it. It's then made synthetically. This is used for cancer patients. It's used to help them get their appetite up. That is also a Schedule 3. Schedule 4. Virtually all of your benzodiazepines are Schedule 4s. Benzodiazepines are used for anxiety. They can be used as sleep aids, but they're better drugs for sleep. than benzodiazepines. They're very good for, catatonic states. The fast-acting ones are good for stutterers. Some stutterers benefit from them. Some are long-acting, some are kind of middle-acting, some are long-acting. You would never use benzos long-term if you can help it, because they're addictive. And to remember the fast-acting, middle-acting, long-acting, you might remember Tom Cruise was at one time married to Katie Holmes. And Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes are almost the same height. And the divorce was in the papers for it seemed years. So the fast-acting ones are midazolam, oxazepam, and temazepam, that goes Tom. The middle-acting ones are alprazolam, temazepam, and temazepam. So short Tom, medium cat, long divorce. DB, divorce Valium, and dioxyethazepam. So that's my stupid mnemonic for the short, middle, and long-acting benzodiazepines taken from pop culture. Gosh, I was proud of that. Anyway, because people don't remember pop culture references usually. Okay, so none of you probably remember TV. Oh well, can't have everything. Okay, so the others that are scheduled for us are the sleep aids, D drugs. So that would include that there's Zolpidem. There's another one that is, as you can see, let's see what I can, here it is. There we go. See the S? That's the S, stereoisomer Zopiclone. So Zopiclone is a racemic mixture. There is the S, stereoisomer, and Lepion, Zolpidem. These are all Z drugs. Those are used to help you sleep. And then benzos, those are your schedule fours. Again, these have some potential for addiction, but not as much as either schedule 2, 3, or 4. And then schedule 5s. These include any cough suppressant with codeine, Lyrica, otherwise known as pregabalin. That's used for chronic fatigue syndrome or neuropathic pain, things like that. Other types of cough suppressants that are mixed with atropine. And then Lomotil, which is used for absence. Lomotil is back on the market after being taken off the market. All right. Questions about the drug schedules? They are constantly being updated. Yes, Elsa?
Should we know the drugs under every schedule?
You should know examples of them. Yeah. You should know that. So if I say name 2 drugs that are scheduled 2s, you should be able to name 2 drugs that are scheduled 2s. Dimethyltryptamine is effective for migraines, it seems, but no one is clear about whether it should be licensed. So it is still not yet licensed. So you would probably be in trouble with the possession of it, but it's not officially listed. So if you get rated, you can come with it. The cops would probably say, what's this? You say dimethyltryptamine, they say Dahu. And you probably get off of that. So that's all it does. Because it's not really officially listed as one of the other things. So that's my understanding. Now, these pregnancy categories are still listed with drugs, but they've been abandoned because it's very hard sometimes to get drugs in one category or another. So what's the one to do? Well, when you look at these drugs online, it will still have the categories for pregnancy. And even though they've been abandoned, many clinicians find them useful. So category A, pregnancy category A means no risk to the unborn baby. This lack of risk has been established by animal studies and by clinical observations. The category A essentially is the best. Category B. Animal studies say the drug is safe, but you just don't have enough clinical data to say one way or the other. So B is, it's probably safe to the unborn baby. A is, yeah, it's safe to the unborn baby. B is, yeah, probably safe to the unborn baby.
Why did you say this category is not abandoned?
Because the lines between them are fuzzy. And so you started having companies say, well, it's B/C, it's A/B. And the FDA started saying, no, pick one.
Yeah.
You can't do multiple choice, pick one. So the company would say, well, if we say it's A, and somebody has a problem, and they're pregnant to take the drug, you have a problem, we're gonna get sued. Because they're gonna blame us. So then they started just saying, look, don't give the drug to anyone who's pregnant. Just so they wouldn't be able to be held liable because of our litigious society.
So is that why they put that on like the side of prescriptions? Like they don't
Yeah.
know what the effects are?
Yep. So COVID vaccinations, what do you say with COVID vaccinations? Let me read you what the sorts of rubbish you get with the COVID vaccination. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommends that the vaccine not be withheld from pregnant or lactating women who are otherwise eligible for the vaccination. Now that's about as non-committal as you can get. It should not be withheld. So you go up there and you say, doggone it, give me that bloody vaccine. It should not be withheld. So basically, okay, if I blame somebody, don't blame me, don't blame me, don't blame me. It's just. Nobody wants to take responsibility and we're just say, look, as far as we know, evidence in hand, it's safe. That's as much as we can say. So late in the day to talk, we have to play God and say, yes, it is. No, it isn't. You know, angel, devil. So forth. That's why it's in bed. You gotta be safe, one thing or another, you're gonna be held to that report law. Oh, Mr. Lepar, did you or did you not say it was category B in our publications? So, you said there was no, you just, you see it, essentially Perry Mason on TV, that's why you've been banned, because nobody wants to take responsibility. But they're still used, because they're useful, because they're useful.
But like the FDA can't use them.
Well, if there's clear evidence of risk, then you can tie a drug to a pregnant woman very easily.
Okay.
And we'll see some drugs that will talk about have definite risks for pregnant mothers.
Okay.
In that case, yeah, you can deny the drug. You can tell them, look, if you get hold of this illegally, I can't take it from taking it, but I won't prescribe it, neither will any other clinician. In which case, you've been warned. You take it, it's on you. But essentially like that was for the Moderna vaccine. There's no evidence the Moderna vaccine poses any harm to an unborn baby or to a pregnant mother or to a nursing mother. But do we have lots and lots and lots and lots of data that says there's no risk? Yeah, no. Do I have a little bit of data that says there's no risk? Yeah, we do. So can we extrapolate from little to lots? Well, yeah, to make your own. So pretty much if you're pregnant and you want the vaccine, it's on you, go ahead and take it. You don't want to take it? Then okay, it's on you. So the responsibility is put back on the pregnant mother. Okay, category C. Animal studies show there's a risk to the unborn baby, but you don't have clinical studies to confirm that. So the benefits might very well outweigh the risks. This is the case with a lot of antidepressants. So it's clear that depression in pregnant mothers can have dire effects on the baby. So in many cases, the view of the APA is if the mother has severe depression, treat her. Even if the drug may pose some risks. Now, we won't cover antidepressants, but some antidepressants have more risks than others. So you have to kind of manage the risk. Category D, yep, you got both clinical and animal evidence of risk to the fetus. So here's the category D, you just don't go there.
Dr. Baratovich,
Yeah.
I don't think the slides are changing for the Zoom.
Don't think the slides are changing for Zoom. Okay, let's try this.
Okay, yeah, that's
Are they
better.
changing now?
Yeah.
Good? Yes?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, good, all right. I can hear them, you can't, so there's some folks saying the slides don't change. All right, pregnancy category X means just what it sounds like. Very, very high evidence of risk. So thalidomide would be in category X. So would most of your anti-cancer drugs. And other types of medicines as well. Some of which we'll talk about. The Orphan Drug Act of '83 comes from the so-called orphan diseases. Orphan diseases were rare, or are rare diseases for which there just aren't any treatments because there's just been very little research done because the number of people who have that disease are small. So in '83, there were diseases like Huntington's disease, diseases like ALS, diseases like spinal cerebral atrophy, things like that. So the Orphan Drug Act essentially pulled drugs that have been shown to really not work for certain things, pull them back into production and allow them to be tested. And if they showed efficacy, even marketed for these rare diseases. And this act proved very, very useful during the AIDS epidemic. Because then drugs that in some cases have been abandoned by companies, their patents could be essentially revived and then be tested on people with AIDS and then other types of rare diseases. And the Orphan Drug Act ended up being very useful because it allowed companies to take drugs offline and then put other drugs back in the assembly line if there was some evidence they had efficacy against certain diseases. So the Orphan Drug Act of '83. Japan adopted this in '93, and then in 2000, European Medicines Agency also followed suit. That's how, this was a pretty good idea as drug legislation goes. '97, brought this Modernization Act. This was meant to, number one, update the administration of the FDA, which was pretty arcane. Back then, its administration was essentially a result of the 1938 Act. Needed a bit of updating, you might guess. It also brought into this testing cosmetics. Many cosmetics before that time only went a little bit of testing. Now, this brought cosmetics in to the fold and required that you had to show the same sort of safety standards for cosmetics. Also allowed for off-label use of drugs and was just intended to kind of take the FDA into the 21st century. It did allow for fast tracking, which fast tracking has proven, especially in the days of the COVID-19 pandemic, to be improvement. Now, with fast tracking, you skip steps? No, you don't skip steps, you just expedite them. Fast tracking is also capable, it can happen if the company has the money to get past, because these tests cost money. And that's one of the reasons why many of these vaccines were fast tracked, was because of the money that the Trump administration made available for the development of these vaccines. Some companies took the money out of it. Moderna did, Pfizer didn't. So I keep reading online that don't take the vaccines, they didn't go through safety testing. That's bull. They did. Now in Russia, there is a vaccine called the Sputnik vaccine. It never went through phase 3 testing. Went to phase 1 and 2, then they said, we'll distribute it, that will be our phase 3 test. So if you take the Russian vaccine, you're the guinea pig for the test. That's not the case with the American or the British vaccines. Same thing with the Chinese vaccine, Sinovac. Sinovac wasn't phase 3 tested. So that's not the case with our vaccines. They went through all 3 phases. Also allowed for termination of drugs that just aren't useful anymore for anything. Okay, let's talk about drug development. Drug development takes lots and lots of time. It costs lots of money. Lots of money. And the gold standard is the randomized placebo-controlled trial. Randomized placebo-controlled trial. So when we talk about placebos, placebo comes from a Latin term, I will please. Placebo is a effect that comes from you taking something that you think is going to help you. You feel better, but you're not actually better. And this effect has been known for years. You must account for it in a drug trial. So you have to have people who are given something that they don't know if it will help them or not. Now, you also have to randomize the trial. So if I'm going to give Jacob this pharmaceutical, and I know what it is, I might give him hints as to what it is. That might affect his thinking about the pharmaceutical. So randomized means I am blinded. Blinded. I don't know what this is. The person who made it does not know to whom I'm going to give it. So he's blinded, I'm blinded, the manufacturer is blinded. We have records, those records are coded. Those coded records at the end of the trial are unblinded. You ask the person with the product, then you figure out who got what. This is the gold standard. This is tedious. This is time consuming. This is expensive, but it's absolutely necessary for drug development. Absolutely necessary. Okay, we talked about those three things: use of controls, randomization, blinding, so on and so forth. So the first phase of drug development involves pre-clinical testing. This is done in a test tube and in a test tube with whiskers. By that I mean laboratory animals. Now, do laboratory animals treat drugs the way our human bodies do? No, but they're a close approximation. They are a close approximation. Are they a perfect approximation? Not anymore. Now, there are ways around that. For example, you can make a mouse that has a human immune system. A humanized mouse, that helps. Is it perfect? No. But it's better than nothing. So pre-clinical testing will tell you essentially if the drug is efficacious and safe at a particular dose. That's what I'm telling you. If your drug gets through pre-clinical testing, you then apply for an institutional new drug status from the FDA. That will issue an IND license. The IND license allows you to begin human clinical trials. It allows you to begin human clinical trials. Usually, you start with maybe a few million compounds. Usually, out of those few million, you may have maybe 50 that get through preclinical testing. Then, those 50, the chances of one of those getting to phase 3 studies is actually not very high. So lots of drugs go through this procedure and fail. Very, very expensive. So phase 1 trials. You're testing for one and only one thing. Is it safe? Is it safe? You're not testing for efficacy. You're testing for safety. You start with healthy volunteers. You start at this dose, and then you give some this dose, and some this dose, and this dose, and this dose, and this dose, and you have them record their side effects. Who are the biggest group for this test? Usually college students. Because college students are poor, and to volunteer for this, you usually get paid. You get the drug, you get money, and you get a little journal. You fill it out. You record the taking of the medicine at a specific time. The dose is known, and then you record your side effects. So if the dose is safe, then you can then move on to phase 2. And the FDA has to give you approval to go on to phase 2 trials. In phase 2 trials, you have a dose that is agreed upon from the phase 1 trials. And now you're going to test it in patients. And you're going to look for dose response. So if this much of the drug is good, this much should be even better. That's what you're looking for with patients. Once again, you're doing double-blinded, placebo-controlled studies. With these studies, usually you start small and then you try to get larger and larger studies. Some of these studies can be really hard to do because you're looking for people who may have a particular condition. There aren't very many of them. Then you have so-called exclusion criteria. Those exclusion criteria cause you to discard patients who have conditions that may confound the results. Very, very rigorous. Once again, safety, safety, safety. You're establishing that the dose to which you are getting an effect, therapeutic effect, that the drug is safe. Maybe your patient gets a rash that goes away. Maybe they get a headache that goes away. Maybe their stomach gets a little upset, something like that. These side effects are essentially the ones, the two groups usually side effects. Ones that occur commonly, that are very severe, ones that occur less commonly and are more severe. In the phase 2 study, you agree upon a final drug formulation. That's the formulation the FDA will end up approving if they approve it. Phase 3 studies. These are now large scale with patients. These again are randomized. The drug is usually compared with another drug within this group. You must be able to show the drug is comparable or superior, or as they say in the literature, non-inferior. Non-inferior means it's just as good as. If the drug gets through phase 3 trials successfully, you then apply for a NDA, new drug application. If the FDA grants the NDA, it gives you the license to market the drug. You market the drug in the formulation that the FDA approved. You cannot vary from it. You must distribute the drug in that formulation. Otherwise, it's a violation of the FDA rules. Now, does that end your testing of the drug? No. Now, doctors are writing scripts for the drug. Pharmacists are fulfilling those scripts. We will still continue to collect data on that drug. This is called post-marketing surveillance. So if you see commercials for atorvastatin, aka Lipitor, they'll tell you Lipitor is the most heavily researched drug around. You know how they can say that? Because there have been so many prescriptions of Lipitor that have been written. Every those prescriptions, patients have been monitored. So doctors have been filling out data sheets on it. That goes to the drug company. This essentially fulfills their post-marketing surveillance. The drugs that were then approved continue to be researched.
Doctors and pharmacists, are they part of
Yeah.
that surveillance too?
Uh-huh.
Not just-
And so are nurses and so are nurse practitioners. If they see a patient who has some sort of response to a drug, it's out of the ordinary, they'll usually report it. They'll get back to the drug company, goes in the database. That database too is public, not private, it's public. So you can actually take that data and you can kind of take that data and then analyze it further if you want. Of course, the drug company is too, but that's part of the post surveillance.
And how long is that usually last?
Oh, as long as the drug is marketed. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, data keeps rolling in. Rolling in, rolling in, rolling in. And phase 4 is voluntary, but everybody does it. And if you don't do it, FDA will look at you askance and say, huh, why aren't you doing this? Now, if the drug company goes out of business, maybe that's why. But it's not legally binding, but everyone does it. Now, can you test everyone in the phase 3 study?
No.
No. Furthermore, can you test that drug on children? Can you imagine the lawsuits? Can you imagine the demonstrations you have on Main Street? The CEO be burning effigy? This person hates children! He tested his poison on children! No, no, no. You're not gonna test your drug on children. Goodness no. Are people gonna prescribe it for children? No. Yeah. So are most drugs tested on children? No. No. And that is a limitation of this because no drug company in their right mind would test a drug on pregnant women or children. Socially, that would not be accepted. Allison?
So, like, prescribe that. They're the guinea pigs?
Pretty much. And the physician is usually obligated to tell parents there are no controlled tests on children. The data is not there. They might then say, well, I prescribed this for kids all 10 or 12 times. That's not that right. I'll prescribe it. If you don't want it, I understand. But it's there as an option. If the parents say, sure, let's go for it. Because they're going to have that screaming kid with an ear infection, won't let me sleep. And then the kid gets a bad rash. And then the doctor gets it, and the drug company gets it. So, you know, it is what it is. That's reality. So this procedure is rigorous, but it has its limitations. Also, chloramphenicol causes aplastic anemia in 1 out of 5,000 people. You gonna pick that up in the phase 3 study? No. No. So rare side effects, rare adverse effects, you're not gonna pick them up in phase 3 studies. You're just not. So while this is rigorous, it has its limitations. Patients also are carefully selected. There are exclusion criteria. And the study is for a relatively short period of time. All right, so as I said, we will use a generic name. So here's a chemical name for a drug. And if you look at that, you probably say to yourself, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea who that is. Beats the heck out of me. So chemical names, not very useful unless you're Bruce Baldwin. Now, if I say that, you probably know what I mean. But trade names, Tylenol, but how many other products have acetaminophen in them? Excedrin, yeah, goodies, lots and lots and lots of products have acetaminophen. So we're going to use the generic name. That's the name that's understood worldwide, except for acetaminophen overseas is called paracetamol. Yeah.
Back when the drug is being tested as drugs, there are range that considered to be effective, like
Statistical certainty. Within levels of statistical certainty.
what's the range different?
No, it's if your drug is non-inferior and the results are statistically significant, then that's essentially what's considered the goal of the study. Now, there's a caveat here because some studies are cut off early. There's a monitoring committee. If the drug passes the goal early, you don't keep giving patients placebos. If that's considered unethical, if that means statistically, the drug may not meet the numbers from the statistical remdesivir. Remdesivir was shown to be statistically significant for recovery, but not for death. But the study was stopped early because of ethical considerations, because the study met its guidelines early. If it kept going, it's good, statistically significant, probably. All right, Wednesday, pharmacodynamics. See you then.
Can I take a picture of this?
Yeah. Okay, gang. See you guys on Wednesday. Ciao.